All right. Well, chapter 13. One thing you'll realize pretty quickly is that chapter 13 does not exist in your book. It's just counting. We're just counting an additional chapter. So I wanted to cover some topics, or a topic that is something that you will run into quite a bit, and this happens especially often when you're dealing with smaller companies. So if you've got a company that hired 3 or 4 people, maybe you've got a leader, manager, something like that of some kind, and they need to get files moved around. Well, smaller companies tend to not have the $5,000 to $10,000 that you would want to put into a good network storage with backup and redundancy. So a lot of times what ends up happening is the stopgap measure, at least until you can figure something out, is just get some basic file sharing going. So I don't know how many times I've walked into a place, and this was the only way that people were able to communicate with each other, at least without having to throw something on a flash drive, walk it over to someone else's desk, and then, of course, plug in the flash drive and deal with the file that way. That's not necessarily a bad way, but it requires a whole lot more effort when you don't have to do that. You can set up file sharing within Windows or within, even in Mac and Linux can speak this language. So a Windows file share is pretty cross-platform. Linux will call it Samba. So if you get yourself in a situation where you have a Linux machine that needs to access Windows file shares, you will utilize a protocol or a rewrite of the protocol called Samba. So now this is nothing you need to know on the Linux side anyway, but it's just kind of a bit of history about how this works. So prior to about, I would say, 6 years ago or so, SMB, server message block, was the name of the protocol that Windows introduced. Well, they changed the name about 6 years ago. The protocol existed back in the 90s. And that's exactly what it was. There have been 3 major revisions of this software, SMBv1, which has been around forever and is still around now. In your Windows 10 machine, you can go into the registry and re-enable it. SMBv2, which added on encryption. SMBv3, which added on some additional encryption and privacy features. Better encryption, essentially, right? One of the things that you want to stay away from, though, as I had mentioned, that you can turn SMBv1 on. Do not ever do this. Not ever. If you are running an operating system that can only understand SMBv1, get rid of the operating system. Do not do not re-enable SMBv1. There's a whole security topic about all this, but the long and short of it is there is an exploit called Eternal Blue that if you have SMBv1 on, if you're sharing anything, it doesn't matter at all. If you are accepting SMBv1 connections, regardless of whether you have shares, you are open to, I guess to use an industry standard term, remote code execution. That's a fancy way to say anybody can poke at your computer and make it do anything that they want to, including illegal things, right? So if you take your laptop out to Starbucks, you are, I guess you probably won't be doing that this week, but if you are ever doing that again in the future and you have SMBv1 enabled, or your laptop is running an operating system so old that it doesn't do anything other than SMBv1, then you're really in a pickle. Windows 7. If your laptop still runs Windows 7, well, please don't, and you take this out and you haven't run updates in a while, I mean, we're talking like 2 years, a while. They fixed this SMBv1 thing, this Eternal Blue thing. They didn't actually fix it. They just turned it off. They turned off SMBv1, forced at least SMBv2, and you're probably, if you have not updated in a couple of years, which one of the big reasons that people stick on Windows 7 is that, well, I don't have to deal with the automatic update. Just update. But anyway, one of the biggest reasons is that people have more control over Windows 7, and that control can lead to forgetting to run your updates. And if you do that long enough, you can be caught in a situation like this. Anyway, you take that machine out. It is trivial. We're talking, you download an ISO, you load it up in a VM, and in about 35 seconds, you can knock over a Windows machine with this exploit. Robert, I don't know where it is. I haven't familiarized myself with it, but right here. And this is how you'll do it. Oof. Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's in the Windows features. Yeah, but don't. You know, in a VM, totally do it. Go grab Kali as well, load up Metasploit, search for the Eternal Blue exploit, and point it to your Windows machine and just press go. Literally, those are the steps to exploit the thing. And then you get full root access, or I guess full system access in Windows terminology. So you can do that in PowerShell as well, looks like. But again, on any machine that you actually care about, any machine that has any file that has any personal information in it, do not do this. Spin up a VM and test it out that way. That's going to be the better way to do that. But anyway, so SMBV1 is effectively dead, but it is not actually dead. And around, I guess around 2010-ish, we started calling the protocol CIFS, Common Internet File Sharing. And you'll see both terms, SMB or CIFS, CIFS. Either really just refers to file sharing and printer sharing in Windows. So anyway, enough with the history lesson. Let's dive in. So it's actually pretty simple to get this stuff done. In Windows, all you're really going to do is remember a couple of different things. If you right-click on this Start button, you can head to Computer Management. This is it. Go to Shares. Right-click in the white space, click New Share. We had created a secondary hard drive on this machine for this reason, for file sharing purposes. It was in the permissions week, and when you're doing file and folder sharing, permissions rears its ugly head again. So you have to recall the things that we learned then, as well as there's a new topic called share permissions that we'll deal with, but there's only one right way to configure share permissions, so there's not too much to know about that, but we'll get there. So anyway, when you create these shares, it's a little easier. Well, it's a lot easier to just deal with an entirely new volume. You don't have to have a separate disk, but you do have to go in to disk management at least and shrink your current volume. So I've got a separate disk. You can decide to do the separate disk, or you can come into the C drive and just shrink it down by a gig or two. So as far as sharing goes, you can get away one way or the other. The one big consideration that you have to deal with, though, is how are you going to do backups? The easiest way to do that is the most cost-effective way, I think, to do that without having to buy a bunch of extra hardware and create massive backup schemes is however much storage you plan on having, double it, as in the number in your head. So if you plan on having 1 terabyte of storage total for everybody in your workspace, then go buy 2 terabyte disks, external USBs. Now remember, we're talking a doctor's office or something like that. You have to follow the HIPAA regulations, but you can cost effectively get around some of these things by just doing something like that. Buying external hard drives and then rotating them, putting them in a safe at the end of the night, and doing your backups in a rotation. One drive for this backup, the other drive for the next backup. One drive for this backup, next, back and forth, and back and forth. So anyway, whatever you're setting up, make sure that stuff is backed up, because it's not if you're going to lose a drive or if you're going to lose a file, it's when, 100%. You will not get through your career without data loss. I guarantee it. There's just no way. So, to that end, just keep backups in mind. We're not focused on that right now. We're focused on just getting the file shared. So, let's focus there. So anyway, to do file sharing, it's easier to create yourself a directory. I don't know why I closed this earlier. Create yourself a directory now. Call it shares. And inside of here, we'll call it important docs. Because that's what, that's of course what you call important document folders. Oops, go to T. Shares, important docs. Hit OK. Got your file path there. You do want to remember that, though that is a little less important. This is more for the admin side. You will want to remember this as an admin. Don't go telling users this. They will not find this useful. But do document it. And I'll show you an easy way to do that at the end of this. This share path is what you're going to give to users. Typically, you will have a name here. This is the automatic name generated by Windows because I didn't go in and change the host name after the fact. But that is something that you do want to do. It is fairly trivial to do. You can do that in the about pane in the system applet. So, is it system? Yeah, no, settings, I think. I always forget where. Yeah. Under system, then about, you should be able to change your host name. Yeah, rename this PC right here. So change it to something other than random gibberish. No one's going to want to type that in. I promise you that. All right. Give it a description. Yeah, this is totally optional. You don't have to actually do that. Ooh, yeah, Canary token. Those are actually pretty cool. If you're focused on security, you want to have a file in there that says we have never altered any file because of some external force. And then when the file goes away, people can assume that, yeah, that is not true anymore. So canaries are pretty cool. Anyway, descriptions. Put all important documents here for backup purposes. Something like that, right? It doesn't really matter what you put in there. And again, it is totally optional, so you don't have to worry too much about that. Now, share permissions. Here's the deal. Come down to customize permissions. Always choose custom. Everyone gets full control. The end. That is how it works. Windows's recommendation for share permissions are exactly that. Everyone, full control. Now, if you come from a permissions background, or at least have a good idea of what we're doing here, then that might set off some alarm bells. I get it. I'm the same way. I've argued this point a bunch. But the answer to that is that everyone gets full control because under security, you are then bound by these permissions. Authenticated users, the system account, and people in the administrator's group can do the given permissions to whatever is in this directory, right? So authenticated users can do anything they want to in this file except for change permissions on things. Administrators can do anything. They have full control. So the deal with this is really just going to be, if you want absolute control, you want to get rid of authenticated users here. And you want to add in individual users or groups. So you can have like a CEO's group with all of those people in that group. And you're really just looking here. We'll create some groups and tinker around with that here in just a little bit. But anyway, let's keep that the way that it is. And then here, so the summary. This is really what you're dealing with as far as documentation. If you copy this out, then you're going to be in a little better shape than if you didn't, right? Because this is the admin info. For admins, you need to know that T shares important docs is the path to this directory. For users, they're going to be typing that in. Hopefully not typing it in, but you will send it to them in an email and they will copy and paste it into right here. They can just copy and paste it right there. And Most times you can get away with doing that locally as well. So just to show, make sure there's not a space up there. You can still get there, right? And I should be part of that group, yeah. Right, so there's a new folder. Create ourselves a new, yeah. I don't think we can do that. All right. So notice up here, this is the share path, right? I'm getting to this via the share path. So if I were on a separate second machine and I type that path in, I would still get this directory. So just to show, if we go to the actual file path, extra T, shares, important docs, we find those same exact files, right? The path here is T shares important docs. The path here is double backslash, blah, 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 slash important docs. So both paths point to the same exact thing. But the path that starts with the drive letter can only be accessed on the local machine. You cannot go to somebody else's computer and type in T:\shares\important docs and it work. It will not work. When you type in a drive letter like this, it is assuming local connection. When you type in a UNC file path, so that is the fancy name for this, the way that you're writing this, UNC, it assumes remote. But, as you can see, you can use UNC paths locally as well. So UNC paths can be used anywhere. Drive letter paths can only be used from the local machine. So don't get caught up trying to type in drive paths on the remote machine when you get into the lab on this one. So anyway, we covered all this. Yeah. Cool. So what you're looking at now, then, is when you go into network, you should be able to find yourself, which is this one, I think. I didn't remember that. Yeah, yourself and the other desktop. So the downside here is I don't have a password on my accounts, so this is not going to work. If you're trying to do file and folder sharing, you need to have passwords on your accounts. If you do not, you will not be able to do file sharing at all. So make sure you come in here. The easy way to do that, same place, right? Same place as shared folders. Come down to local users and groups. Click on users right here. You can open him up, add some information to it, but right-click on him. Set password. It's going to ask you, hey, this is going to change your password, blah, blah, blah. And then you just set it. Whatever you need that to be. Password has been set. Now, it's best to just put a password on both sides, but kind of a caveat to what I was saying before is the only account that needs a password when you're doing file sharing is the one you're logging into to get access to the stuff. So I didn't set a password on this machine over here. But I don't need one if I just plan on getting into this machine here, into the shared folder. So let's see what shows up. Because you're going to run into a few different things, right? You're going to need file sharing turned on if you want to create file shares. Now, this computer doesn't have file shares. I didn't set any up on it, and that's okay. You're not necessarily going to need this, because all this really does is turn on firewall rules. So incoming connections will be allowed once you do this. You should be able to get through without, and then of course it's going to ask you those credentials, right? I just set the password, so I know what it is. type in that same username and password here, and I get access to important docs. This is that stuff I just created. So let's prove it. Actually, don't need the UNC file path. I just go there. Under shares, under important docs, let's create ourselves a new folder or file, text document. Testy test. And look at that over here. Boom. I can go into testy test, save some stuff, open it up over here. Bingo, bango. Stuff. So, if your machines were stuck on a private network right when they were installed, first login, you plugged it in and it's like, hey, do you want to make files and printers visible on this computer to this network, blah, blah, blah. Let's say you didn't do that. You can check, by the way, what you chose by going to, if you right-click on the network icon down here, open network and internet settings, you'll come up here, and it'll tell you private or public. If it says public, then you're going to need to fix some things. If you don't want to change the profile, then you're going to have to go into the firewall and configure it just a little bit. So anyway, just to kind of show you where we're at, I found it in network. I know this is all Windows 7 looking stuff, but that's okay. Nothing changed. You'll find, so you'll go into the computer, you'll type in the username and password, you'll find the share, you'll go inside of here and then start messing around with it. Oh, the last little bit, before we get into the firewall stuff, if you want to map a drive, which can also be pretty important, you want to get the share path. This is why it was important. You need that. Let's copy that. Go back to this PC. Let me see. There it is. Under the computer tab, you can map a network drive. So click that. Paste the path in there. Pick a letter, any letter, doesn't matter, so long as you don't reuse it. So, W looks good. And then hit finish. Pops it up for you. Easy peasy, right? Same file, same folders. And now, there's this. You can now directly access that particular folder from the same place that you would go to your C drive. It's now labeled W. That makes it a lot easier for people to deal with. You can also, there used to be, there it is, create shortcut. Yep, Windows can't create a shortcut there, obviously, there's already one there. Do you want one to be put on the desktop? Looky there. Now, anybody that needs to, and you can rename this if you want to, it doesn't have to stay that name. But anybody using this computer, well, anybody using this account, I guess, will have access to this particular thing. We'll name it that. Important docs share. So you double click on that, and there it is. Makes it easy. People love their desktop icons. I don't think that'll ever go away. So we map the drive. You see it. Okay, so firewall. So, if you're on a private network and it doesn't work, or you're on a public network and file sharing doesn't work, then the answer to both of those is the same. You'll need to go to the firewall, and you'll need to make some adjustments. So type in firewall, and you want, I believe it's this one, Windows Defender Firewall. Well, they keep changing the name of this thing, so it's always, yeah, see, it's not exactly that one. So if you go to Windows Defender Firewall, that's fine. You can click on Advanced Settings, but there is a Windows Firewall with Advanced Settings in that list. So either or. During our firewall lesson, we ended up here. Make sure you end up here. Windows Defender Firewall with Advanced Security. If for some reason you can't find it in the Start menu and just have to find it in the Start menu, this is its proper name. Type that in. So inbound rules. Well, I'm doing this on the wrong machine, but I suspect it might already be there. No, there it is. Here's the deal. Here's how I know this. I don't memorize absolutely everything. There are documents, supporting documents, and configuration for everything. So I've given you the actual, real, live Windows TechNet article that you would stumble across if you were really doing this. So if you come on down, right, the firewall ports necessary for file and printer sharing are not open. Oh no. You will not be able to access shared folders and other SMB services. Oh no. The resolution is open the firewall. How to do that? Right here. So the things that you're looking for are go under inbound rules, find file and printer sharing NB session in, and file and printer sharing SMB in. So we'll look for those. Now, one of the things that you need to pay attention to, so what was it? NB session in and SMB in. So NB session in, there are a couple, private and domain. If you are not on private or domain, there's not even one. Yeah, you need to be on private, essentially, then. So not public. But anyway, most of the time when you're changing networks, and you're going to change networks during this whole thing, you need to click yes when it asks you, do you want to enable file and printer sharing on this network? So I'll show you. UFW in Linux does. Yeah, Samba should be in there as a pre-configured rule. So you just allow Samba or disallow Samba, something like that. So anyway, SMB session in private, you want to enable that. Notice this, the profile. If you do domain and you're not on a domain, it's not going to have any effect. So you only want to, oh, I see, it's private and public. I didn't notice that. So you turn that on, and then SMB in, private and public, enable rule. So what I was saying before, even if you choose no, looks like this rule will enable it anyway. So yes or no, doesn't really matter. Less stress, less stress. Turn those two things on, and you will get file and printer sharing going on. If you need to share printers, then you got to come down here and do spool service as well. But for now, just for what we want, these are the only two rules that you need to turn on. So get those on. Also, makes it a little easier on your life when you open this up and click on network, and it pops down and it says this. Enable this. These are some additional rules that make this stuff a little easier to see. But those are the two important rules. Those two. That will make it work if you know the UNC file paths and just information about what you're setting up. So I said we would talk just for a minute about users and groups and the permission side of all of this. So this shouldn't take too terribly long. Back to computer management. We can create ourselves a couple of new users. Probably don't want to do that. Okay. I don't know why I closed it the first time. Could have just made Billy right after. Anyway, and then we create a group. All right, so those are just two new users, right? The difference between Leo and the other two are what I'm a member of. Leo is a member of administrators, so I am part of that group. Jenny is a member of regular users. Billy is regular users. Now, we saw authenticated users a little while ago. That is a special identity group, meaning if you logged into the computer, you are part of the authenticated users group. This might be a good time to remove out the authenticated users group from specific file shares that you do not want to be sharing out with just anybody that has an account on the computer. If you want this to be more secure, you've got to take that group out. So the deal with this then is I'm an administrator, Jenny and Billy are regular users. We can put them all in a group called CEOs. And then we can add in Billy. Check names. Cool. I think it's a semicolon that separates them. Yep. And another semicolon, Leo. Cool. So Billy, Jenny, Leo. Click OK. And I'm hitting check names there. So Windows will fill this out for me so it doesn't have to guess as to which user I'm talking about. So if there's a Jenny with a Y and Jenny with an I, you know, just to make sure. Anyway, Billy, Jenny, Leo. Click create. Right? CEOs, super important people. Put a description on that, right? So it looks nice. And then you can come back to your shares and start editing the permissions on these things. Oops. Oh, wrong thing. I need to actually get to the right folder, and we'll do that. So share permissions, leave that alone. Everyone, full control, right? We can get rid of authenticated users. Here, let's edit. Oh, see, again with the inheritance. So we'll leave that in there for now. And then we can get CEOs. Check names. Bing, bang. So give them full control. Good to go. That'll take care of you. So an entire group, the CEOs, anybody in that group now has full control to this whole directory. With authenticated users, you can really just start to maybe deny or something like that. Or you have to start dealing with inheritance, which you're not going to get away from it. I mean, you can try, but yeah. So what's really going to end up happening is check what's up here at the very top in T. See what's in security. You got authenticated users up here. So if you remove authenticated users from this, it will remove it from every folder underneath. Every folder and every file inherits that ownership. So remove it from T, and it will flow down to all the other directories. So as you notice, I couldn't get rid of it from this directory because it was inheriting. You can break inheritance. I don't recommend it, but you can go in and explicitly say, do not inherit from the parent. And that will, I mean, it will stop listening to the folders it's in for permissions. But you're on your own at that point. No change you make anywhere else will affect this folder. You have to come in and manually configure this folder for permissions every single time you do that. So, if that's what you want, then obviously that's what you want. If it is not, or if you do not intend to do that, then do not break inheritance. That is just something that if you have a good reason to do it, and you have documented that you have done it, then do it. That's fine. But if you do not have a good reason to do it, then just don't. Fix inheritance. Go to the T drive and fix what is ailing you instead. You can always add authenticated users back on underneath in folders underneath, right? So I can turn it off in T. Everybody loses authenticated users, but then I can come into, say, new folder and then add it back in. So there's nothing saying you can't add it back in further down. You just don't want to break that inheritance chain. All right. So those are the basics. Those are your permissions. That's how you create a file or a folder share. And that is pretty much the top and the bottom of the notes. That is documentation on the Microsoft side on how to actually do that. I'll see if I can't find the link where Microsoft describes why they want the sharing permissions that way. But it is the recommendation. So you tend to do what Microsoft says because Microsoft can break in some really interesting ways if you don't. So anyway, those are your notes. Pretty much the notes are just a big old how-to on how to do all this stuff. Permissions are covered here in this video. And that's about it. That's really what you need. So as far as the lab goes, that's all you have. You'll need 2 Windows 10 VMs. If you're hurting for RAM, bring the Windows VM to 768 megs of RAM each. That'll be about 1.5 gigs. That way you can run both. They will not be fast. I will warn you now. They will probably be the slowest things that you've ever encountered. But you got to get the lab done. So use VirtualBox NAT networking. Real quick, have we covered this before? NAT networking? I'm pretty sure we have. I want to say we have. Maybe not, though. I'm going to assume not. So let me show you. Okay. Let me show you how to do VirtualBox NAT networking. So really what you're doing is you're creating a network and you're just adding the 2 VMs to it. So in Windows, you will find file in, oh no, I'm sorry. Let me see. Yeah, I think in Windows, you'll find this under File Preferences. In Mac, it's under VirtualBox Preferences. Go to Network and create one. Just press the plus right here. You can either double click on the new one or you can click the little cogwheel down here. Either will get you to this screen. You don't have to name it, you can. You don't have to change this network address, but you can to anything that you'd like, so long as it's a network ID, otherwise it won't work. You want it to support DHCP, and then click OK. That's the heavy lifting on a NAT network. So then, on your VMs, you can do this live. You don't have to turn your VMs off to do this. You right-click on the little network here, the little network icon. Go to Network Settings. Right? Or, if they are not running and you want to do it from here, you can right-click on them, right-click on the VM, hit Settings, and go to Network. Both of those options will do the same exact thing. And then you want to attach it to a NAT network. And then make sure that I haven't closed VirtualBox. If it doesn't show up, close VirtualBox fully and then turn it back on and it'll show up. So choose your NAT network in the list, click OK. Do that for both VMs, and they will then both be on a network where they can communicate with each other. So one can ping the other as long as the firewall's configured. That's another rule. If you can't ping each other, you need to go in and turn on ICMP in. So if you're just doing, see, where's the advanced, man? Doesn't even show up. I think it's just called all ICMP. Nope, sure enough, it's not. Ah, there it is. File and printer sharing echo request. That's the one. If you want, and it's the private and public networks, if you want ping to work, you got to come in and turn on this rule. That will allow ping. Then, lastly, oh no, that's it. That's pretty much it. Get them both on that NAT network. So when you open up network settings, it looks like this, right? NAT network and whatever you named it, if you named it, or it'll just say NAT network, either or. And then you can use some of the skills that you have up to this point. ipconfig. Make sure you have an IP address. Come back over here. ipconfig. Make sure they are on the same network. So while you guys may not have super awesome subnetting chops, you should be able to, at least at this point, tell whether an IP address is on the same network as another. So anyway, those are the skills you need to get through this lab. The lab doesn't take long, but you have to pull from a bunch of different buckets of skills to be able to get this done. So anyhow, you're going to create a username Scott. You're going to share a folder. Scott and local administrator should have full control, but nobody else, right? So you're going to have to go fix inheritance. Take out that authenticated users group. And then take a screenshot of the share permissions. Take a screenshot of the security permissions and highlight Scott in that screenshot. And then on the second Windows 10 VM, create a user named warehouse. Doesn't matter what the password is. Then map a network drive to the folder you shared on Scott's computer. So you're basically going to do exactly what I showed you to do today. The only difference is that the usernames are going to be different. But there's been an example today of everything you need to do. So if you have questions, check out the video. If for some reason the video doesn't make sense, ask. So you just need those 3 screenshots. Share permissions on Scott's computer, security permissions on Scott's computer, and then a mapped drive on the warehouse computer. Those 3 things. Give me those 3 things, you get full credit. Notice 33 times 3 only equals up to 99. You get a free point just for submitting. Yay! So worst case scenario, you should be getting a 1, not a 0. Anyway, that's it. That's all I got for you guys today. Hopefully the shortness will be offset with the lab itself.